Hi, and welcome to Code Tutorials. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the Working Hours block, which is part of our Key Blocks for Gutenberg Premium plugin. As its name suggests, the Working Hours block can help you create a neat overview of your working hours, opening times, periods of availability, and what have you. While it may look like it creates a list, you'll see soon there's much more to it. For one, it cuts down on the time you'd waste on formatting and layout if you try this with a simple text block. And it includes a variety of style options that will ensure the Working Hours block integrates with your site design perfectly. During this video, I'll be breaking down these two examples to show you the block's options. As you can see, we'll be able to pick fonts, text sizes, colors, backgrounds, and so much more. Besides that, the working hours can be easily combined with any of the other blocks in the Key Blocks collection to create sections that will be as elaborate or as simple as you like. With that said, let's take a look at how to set this block up. Head over to the back end. You'll need a page to work in. I prepared this one by creating two columns in it for the two elements I'll be creating. And now I can add my first block. Blocks can be added by clicking on this blue button here. This will open the block selection. Here you'll find all the blocks your site has. You can search for a specific block here, or you can browse through your collection to find a suitable block for your needs. So the view here includes both the key blocks, which you can tell apart by the reddish pink icons, and everything you get with Gutenberg, as well as any other blocks you may have installed. And when you find the block you want, then you can add it to the page via simple drag and drop. All in all, this is one way of adding a block to your page. Let me close this. An alternate way involves adding a block from within the page. Here you can click on the plus sign button on the far right, or, because I have space set aside in these two columns, click on the plus sign in the reserved space. This will open a pop-up window where you have a search function so you can look for your block by name. But we can also see some recently used blocks below. And since, for me, Working Hours is one of those, I'll just click on it to add. There we go. And this is what the Working Hours block looks like when it's just been added to the page. We have minimal styling, entries for each day of the week, a title, subtitle, and some text at the bottom. And all of these are things we can customize. To do that, you'll need the Content tab and the options within it. The first one is Subtitle, for replacing the dummy subtitle text that you can see here. Alongside it, we have the Title, for replacing this title text here. And with these two, we have the Text field, where you can enter some additional or descriptive text that will be shown under the working hours. I'm going to quickly replace the content of these three fields with my own. It's simply typing over what's already there. In the text field, I'll paste in my text because I prepared it earlier and it contains some HTML. You can just as easily add plain text. I opted for this because I wanted to show you a phone number with a click to dial link. Still, while we're here, let me break down what I have. First, there's some plain text with an asterisk saying call us now. Then we have an HTML tag for a link. That's everything after this less than sign followed by an A. And within that link, I have the number that will be called once someone clicks. And under it, we can see my anchor text, the phone number that will be visible to the naked eye. And between those two, I set a color for my link. 6Fs is the hex code for plain white. And that's also why we can't see the number at the moment. It's the same as the page background color. We do see the underline that appears under link text. And when we hover over it, the cursor switches to a pointer, indicating that there is something that we can click on here. I will leave this as is right now, since I plan to change the background color for the block a bit later. Okay, moving on to the other options. The next one we have is the Enable Column Responsive Layout. With this, we can set below which screen width the block display will become more compact. Namely, if the screen it's viewed on is too small, the block will adapt by doing things like dropping the dotted line between the days and the working hours to make all the information fit the screen. We have several options in this drop-down, and I'll use under 680 pixels, which is broadly the width of a portrait orientation on tablets. Then there's the option to enable a separator. If we switch this to yes, we'll get this line dividing the subtitle and title from the rest of the block's content. I don't plan to use this as part of my design, so I'll set the option back to no. After that, we have a list of menu items. Each item represents a day in the list of working hours. Since there are days from Monday through Friday in the list, it means there are 5 items in the options. At this point, you need to decide if you want to show the working hours by days or if you want to group them. If you decide to keep the days as they are, you can open each one and modify it with your own content. However, I plan to group my days, so I'll erase most of these default items. Just click on the little X icon to delete an item. I'll remove all but one. Give me a moment. Okay, there. And now we can go through the item options. You'll have the same ones in each item you keep or make. The first option here is for adding an icon. You can upload one, pick one from your media library, or insert one from URL. In any case, the icon you want to add needs to be in SVG format, as you can see from this note here. I'll add something from my media library, this, and select. And the icon appeared on the page right before the name of the day. Speaking of the name of the day, it's the next thing we can change. This is a plain text input field, so you can type in anything you like. And this is how I'm going to group my days. After Monday, I'll simply add to Friday. There. With this one item, I've covered the whole work week. Under that, we have the working hours field, which is where you can set the actual time. It's another plain text input field, and I'm going to modify this to say from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Finally, we have the item color option. We have this user-friendly color picker that lets us easily change the color of the item's content. You can see the whole thing from the icon to the working hours gets changed. Now I'm going to clear the color setting here to restore the default value. I do plan on changing the color, but I'll be doing that later using the Style tab options. If I change the color here, it will affect only this one item. So it's a good idea if you want something to stand apart. But if I change the color later, I can change multiple items at the same time. Okay, moving on. We covered all the options that come with a menu item. I'll close this and then click here to duplicate the item. Then I'll quickly go through the options and customize what I need, which is just the name of the day field. And there, done. Then I'll copy the second item and customize the resulting duplicate as well. You can also add brand new items by clicking on this button here. I opted to make copies because I wanted to keep some of the settings the same for all items, such as the icon. Okay, and the third item, I'll just change the name of the day. Give me a second. And under working hours, I'll replace the time with text saying closed. And last but not least, I'll set an item color here. I want the day that is non-working to stand apart from the rest. So I'll change its color to white with the degree of transparency here. Okay, we can see that the text and numbers have seemingly vanished. Just like the telephone number, they'll become visible once I change the background color later on. For now, I'm done with my third item, and so I'll close it. Moving on, after the menu items, we have the advanced section. It contains only one option, the additional CSS classes. This is where you can create a specific class for this element, and then you can use that class and refer to it when creating CSS that would style the working hours block. Okay, that's all for this first options tab. Let's open the second one, Style. The Style tab is subdivided into several levels of smaller tabs. As the first level, we have the Item, General, Text, and Spacing sub-tabs. The Item one is open now, and we can see that it too has its own sub-tabs for styling different aspects of the item: icon, day, hours, and line. The first one, Icon, is already open, and we can see its options. But before we dive into them, I want to go back up a level and open the sub-tab with the general options. In here, I can adjust my background. So let's take a look at that first. The topmost option allows us to pick which background type we want to use. There's Classic and Gradient. Let's look at Gradient first. This background type allows us to set a 2-color gradient fill for our background. So you set the first color here, for example, this one. And then underneath, we have the second color. I'll use something that will be contrasting enough to show the gradient transition, say this. And once you've picked your colors, you have the angle and 2 location options to adjust your gradient. I'll just set some random values here to show you what the gradient background might look like. Okay, there. And once the gradient becomes visible, you can fine-tune the settings if you want to. Now, what we see is the linear gradient type. We can also have a radial one. With this, the colors radiate out from a certain point, and you can set what that point will be using the position option underneath. However, I don't plan on using the gradient background type, so I'll switch back to the classic one. There we go. With the classic background type, we can set a single color for the background, or you can pick an image. We have an example of what an image might look like on the blocks page. If I go back to it briefly, this is it. These 2 examples are using images as backgrounds. So that's one possible way of styling your working hours block. Going back to the options, I want to set a background color. And that can be done using the slider if you want to eyeball it, or by adding a hex code for a specific color, which is what I want to do. Give me a sec to type it in. Okay, there. And as soon as I set the color, those bits of content that were white became visible. And those are the Sunday working hours with their degree of transparency and the phone number, which is solid white. Okay, we have one more option in this section, and that is the border type. With it, we can add a border that would frame the working hours block. And if you want to use a border, you need to make a few settings before it can become visible. Let me show you. We need to set the border type. I'll use solid. And this gave me additional options that I need to set. There's a border width, where I'll click to connect the fields for different sides of the element into one. I'll set 3 pixels for the border width. And then for the color, I need something contrasting. So let me see, let me move over into orange shades. Okay, there. Now we can see the border I set. And this is just an example. You can set different colors, widths, and types to get a totally dissimilar look to this one. However, I don't plan on keeping the border, so I'll reset the settings for it. Give me a moment. Type 2. Okay, done. And that's what we have in the General sub-tab of the Style options. Let's get back to the item one. This is where I'll be able to adjust my content colors, starting with the icon and its settings. Right away, we have the icon color. I want mine to be plain white, so I'll set the hex code for that. There. We can see the icons much more clearly now. After this, we have the icon size option. I want to make my icons a touch smaller, so I'll set 15 pixels here. Okay, those 2 options were for the icon. Let's see what we have for styling the day. To begin with, we can choose the HTML tag that's used for the name of the day. That's this text here. You can pick anything from this drop-down, but I plan to stick with the default setting. Then we have the day color. And this is what I was referring to earlier when I mentioned changing the color in the style options. Because if I set something here, it's going to affect all the days whose names haven't been specifically set in the item options. And as always, you can use the slider for that or type in a hex code. And this is why Sunday is still the same, but Monday through Saturday have changed. Now I'm going to use the day color option to make them both white, so they'd match the icon's telephone number and so on. There we go. After that, we have the day typography. This is a collection of options that allows us to change different typographical aspects of our text content. I don't plan on changing the default settings, but we'll go through the options together so you know what's in here. So there's font family, and you can choose from hundreds of different fonts to find the one you like. And there's a search function to help you if you know the exact font name. Then there's font size, which accepts input in pixels, ems, rams, or the viewport width. After that, the font weight option allows us to make the day names normal, light, bold, or anything in between by picking a setting from this drop-down. Next, the transform option can be used to change the names to uppercase, lowercase, make them capitalized, or leave them normal, the way we type them in. Then the style option serves to keep the text normal or turn it italic or oblique. Following that, the decoration option lets us add a line under, over, or through the text. And finally, we have the line height and letter spacing options. in case there are any adjustments you want to make to the spaces between the lines with day names or the individual letters within them. And those are all the typography options. I'll close this now and we can move on to the next sub-tab, Hours. Here we have the hours color option. We can use it to change the color of the working hours. And just like we saw with the color of the day names, this option will work on all items that don't have any individual color settings already made, such as my non-working day where we can see closed hasn't changed colors. I'm going to use white again, so give me a moment to add the proper hex code for it. Alright, there. Then we have the hours typography. It contains the same collection of settings that we saw with the day typography, so I don't think there's any need to go into detail again. Instead, I'll make the changes I need for my design and we'll carry on. I want a different font, so okay, that's the one. Whoops. Then I'll set the font size for the hours to be 18 pixels. Also, I want to make the numbers bolder, so I'll switch the weight to medium 500. And last but not least, I'll change the font weight to 26 pixels. That's it from me here. I'll close this, and given that it's the last option for the hours, I'll move on to the line style options. These affect the lines between the day names and the working hours. And the first thing we can change here is the line type. The default setting is between, which puts the line between the two bits of content. Granted, it's a bit hard to see because the line is in the default dark color, but you can still make it out. Then, if I switch to below, the line will move to almost underline the days and the hours as well as the space in between. We also have the option of setting this to none, which will remove the line entirely. In that case, the days and hours will stick closer together. I'll go back to using between. Then we have the border type option. Just to show you, I'll set mine to solid. It's the simplest type of border. Next, we have the border width. But before I change anything there, I'll skip down to border color. I want to adjust it so the line is more visible. I'll use a hex code to help me here. I want to have them the same transparent white that I'm using for my non-working day. There we go. Now that the lines are more visible, if I go to the border width option and set, for example, 3 pixels at the bottom, the lines will get much thicker. This is because I added a border to them at the bottom. If I added one at the top, it would act as an additional line, so you could have a 2-line connection between the days and hours. But that's just an idea. I like the original width, so I'll erase this to get it back. Okay, and with that, we've covered all the style options for the line. Since that's the last branch of the item sub-tab, we can move to the next sub-tab, and that is General. However, we've already gone over this when I set the block background color. So let's keep moving and open the Text sub-tab. As you can see, this too is subdivided into different branches that cover different aspects of the text content. The first one is dedicated to styling the title. That's this text here. To begin with, we can change its tag. You can pick anything you like from this drop-down, but I plan to keep the default H2 setting. Then we have the title color option. You can easily pick a new color, or set a specific one like I'm about to. I'll use white to keep everything matching. And under that, we have the title typography settings. It's the same collection of options we've already seen, so there's no need to waste time on this. And since I don't plan to make any changes here, I'll simply close the options. So that's the title done. Moving on to the subtitle. Here we have a set of options that echo what we've seen with the title, beginning with the subtitle tag. The available settings in the drop-down are the same as we've seen before. I'll leave mine set to the default H5. Then we have the subtitle color. I'll set white for this. Give me a moment. Alright, there. And then we have the subtitle typography collection of options. It's all the same as before, so if there's anything about the subtitle typography that you want to change, this is where you can do that. Okay. That brings us to the final branch, or the text options. They will help you style this additional text under the working hours. The phone number I added is already styled thanks to some HTML, but now we can get the rest of it to match. The first thing we can do is change the text color. And if I set something random here, we can see that it only affects the plain text, not the number that has special formatting. Also, this color change will encompass the line that appears under any linked text. In this case, I have it under the number. Okay, I'll change the color here to plain white so everything will match. And there we go. After that, we have another set of typography options. It's all the same, so we'll carry on. I'll just quickly change the weight to medium 500. Okay, and the last option here is the Enable Text Underline. Despite its name, this is a link underline, and we can see it here within the block. So if you want, you can switch this option to No and remove the underline for any link text that you may have. I'll set this to Yes as I want to keep a line under my link. And since this was the last of the branching tabs under text, we'll move on to spacing. The first option here is space between items. It allows us to add space between the different items we have in our working hours list. So if I set 50 pixels here, we get this additional room between the different items. I'm going to set 23 pixels for this. Under that, we have the items padding option. This option lets us add space around the items, and the padding is applied to each of the items individually. Let me show you. I set 30 pixels at the top. Suddenly we have more room above each of the items. And if I want to move my content a bit inward, I can set, say, 70 pixels on the right, and then it'll be further away from the edge. Additionally, I can put 50 pixels at the bottom, and then my items will be more dispersed. Or I can add 50 pixels on the left side, and this will push the content away from the left edge of the block. I chose these values as examples. That's why I was so heavy-handed with the settings. However, I don't plan to use the padding at all. I'll be adjusting my spacing using a few of the other options here. So I'll clear these values. Give me a moment. Okay, after this we have the holder padding option. It treats the entire block content as one unit, so the space gets added around that. I'm going to use this option to separate the content from the edges of the block. Give me a moment while I add the values I need for that. Just a sec. And there. Now my working hours are more compact while still looking neat within their space. Following this, we have the subtitle margin bottom option. With it, we can add more space under the subtitle, here, and in doing so, separate it from the title a bit. For example, if I set 30 pixels here, I get this additional space. But I'm happy with the default values, so I'll clear this. Then we have the title margin bottom, which lets us add more space under the title, here, before the working hours list starts. So if I set 50 pixels here, I'm going to get a much bigger gap. I actually want to make this space a touch narrower, so I'll set 27 pixels instead. Perfect. And finally, we have the text margin top option. It's for adding space above this additional text. You can use this to draw the text further away from the list. For example, if I set 50 pixels, there's a lot more room above it. A bit too much actually, so I'll set 32 pixels for this. There we go. And my first working hours block is completed. Entirely customized and styled to fit my planned design. I'm going to make a second one now. And since it's going to be pretty similar to the first one, the simplest thing for me to do is make a copy. So click here to reveal more options and then go to duplicate. And then I'll just drag this copy to the space I set aside for my second working hours element. Now I plan to keep the content mostly identical, but I will be modifying the style. The idea is that you'll get to see how you can create different looks by making small adjustments to the options. So to start with, in the Content tab, I'll change the color for the telephone number link. I'll set something that's close to black. Don't worry, I plan on changing the colors for both the background and content. So the number is dark now, but it will be quite visible by the time I'm finished with the block. Now, since we've gone over all the options already, I won't dawdle with them. We'll quickly go through the changes so you can see the effect variations in settings can have. For the second block, I'll remove the icon I used. So open the item and click to delete the SVG. Okay, and I'll do the same for the other two. Give me a moment. And okay, done. Also for this third item, I'm again going to set it apart by using a different color. And the new color will be a shade of tangerine. We can see it here. And since I'm not changing the content, I can move to the Style tab. Here I'm going to use the item options, open the ones for day, and then change the color of the day name text. It's going to be the same shade of almost black I used for the phone number. Okay, and I'll set the same color in the hours options. Give me a moment to type in the hex code I need. There, perfect. Then I'll adjust the line color too. I wanted to go with my new color palette. So border color and hex code for a light gray shade. And we can't see the line properly, but that's gonna change when I set a new background color. So I'm done with the item style options. Let's move on to the general style options. This is where I'll have the background color option, and I can change my block background to make my content easier to see. Just a sec. Okay, there. That's all I wanted in this tab, so let's keep moving. In the text style options, I'm going to change the title color. I want it to match the working days. Perfect. And the same goes for the subtitle color. Just a sec while I add the right hex code. There. My second working hours block is shaping up. Now the next thing I have to change is the text color. That's this bit here next to the phone number. I'm going to input the same hex code I've been using for most of this block. Okay, there. And that's my styling variation done. I'll hit update to save my work. I now have 2 working hour blocks with different looks done and dusted. For more ideas on possible style, layout, and overall design you can use for this blog, check out the page we started from. It contains different examples, all with different settings that showcase the range of possibilities you have with the working hours block. You can also find some inspiration for layout solutions or ideas on how you can combine multiple instances of this block, or even how to combine this block with others from the Key Blocks collection. However, this is in no way a definitive list. Now that you know all the settings available with this block, you can just as easily create an entirely custom combination of them, which will result in a unique look for your site's working hours block. Whatever you decide to do, we hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you have any questions after watching this guide to the working hours block, or comments or suggestions you'd like to make, please drop us a line in the comments section below. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel and be the first to learn about any new tutorials and theme guides. Thank you for watching.